Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second panel of the day, How to Talk Climate. This panel will invite us to learn about climate discourses, framing that often characterizes these discourses, and ways you can communicate strategically in public or diverse conversations on the topic of the climate crisis. So my name is Isabel Oke. I am a PI intern who is currently placed in the Liberal MP for Halifax West's office, Lena Metledge-Diab. It is a pleasure to be hosting and moderating the Q&A for this session. As a former student of discourse, lifelong learner, I very much look forward to the panel ahead, especially because my hopes and dreams are that increased discourse literacy can help all of us appreciate our capacity to construct complex communicative structures. I'll say that's me getting a little abstract with things. But also, better discourse literacy helps us engage with these processes ethically. So I will be starting off our panel today with an introduction of the panelists who have joined us. And I'll start with Dr. Dara Al-Rashid, who is the Resource and Training Director at ReClimate, an organization that brings together leading climate communication academics and practitioners to support leaders across sectors with implementing evidence-based best practices in their outreach efforts. They hold a postdoctoral fellowship at Carleton University's School of Journalism and Communication. They're the interim director of Align Media Lab, and they have experience spanning academic, federal, and NGO sectors. In their role at ReClimate, Dr. Al-Rashid conducts research, produces tools, resources, and training programs for the organization's network. Our next panelist joining us today is Montana Burgess, who is the Executive Director of Neighbors United. Neighbors United uses deep canvassing, a transformational voter persuasion method developed from US social movements to move voters on climate, energy, and biodiversity policy. Since their success getting a bylaw adopted in a heavy industry smelter town, they use deep canvassing, community organizing, and strategic communications to shift movable middle community narratives on key policy in rural, small town, and suburban communities. Apart from running their own campaigns, Neighbors United trains, coaches, and mentors partner groups in Canada and the US to integrate deep canvassing and get on the ground wins. Montana is a queer settler based on the unceded territory of the Snisht peoples in southeastern BC. Apologies if it's been mispronounced. But I will now move to the introduction for our final panelist, Katie. So Katie Harper has a wealth of facilitation experience, notably through her work at Talk Climate to Me. And I will quote their tagline because it's got style and it leads with relatability. So Talk Climate to Me is a fun, free, unscary, online, team-based climate education experience for women and allies in Canada. The org recognizes the gap in climate literacy and confidence for women and gender diverse people and aims to close the gap and facilitate climate activation through conversation and connection. Katie has worked in the nonprofit and corporate sectors for a decade and a half, is a youth mentor in nature connection at Pine Project Outdoor School, and holds a master's in freshwater ecology from McGill University. To delve deeper into our esteemed panelists' backgrounds, feel free to explore the profiles on AirMeet. Additionally, AirMeet also has a resource tab where panelists and organizations may share valuable resources for our audience. Towards the end of the session, we'll open up the floor for a Q&A session, allowing the audience to engage and ask questions using the Q&A function. So thank you everyone for being here. And another before we get started, we have a poll question for you, which is, what do you think Canadians really think about climate change? So please feel free to send your answers, your thoughts, and also send over your questions for the end of the session. And so with that, I will now start with our first panelist, Dr. Al-Rashid. And I hope that's correct. Yes. Dr. Al-Rashid, please take it away.
Yes, hi Isabel. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Gada. Again, as Isabel mentioned, I'm the training and resource director at ReClimate. So I'll just share my slide here. Give me 1 second. All right, here we go. Perfect. So, well, just to give you a little bit of an idea about Reclimate, Reclimate is a nonpartisan organization or institution housed at Carleton University. And our goal is to support and build a climate communication and engagement capacity across different sectors and organizations. And one of the things that we do, or one of the objectives is that we have is to capture kind of what Canadians think about climate change, climate solutions, climate impact, climate-related issues, and at a certain point of time, because all of these are changing. And so we do periodical roll-up of surveys. So every year we review the public surveys that are out there and try to get a sense of what Canadians or the consistent patterns and findings that tell us about Canadian attitudes or stances towards certain issues that support or hinder climate action. So I'm not going to go through all the findings. There's a lot, but I'll go through some of the main ones and to share here. So one of the things we wanted to capture in the last roll-up that we did is the level of literacy and awareness about the cause of climate change. As you know, the scientific consensus and the cause of climate change is clear and well established. Human activities, primarily the burning of fossil fuels like coal, gas, and oil, are the main drivers. And these activities increase the concentration of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere, which causes the warming and the enhanced greenhouse effect. And as you can see, the percentage actually of people people in Canada attributing climate change to human activity has declined in recent years. So in 2021, it peaked at 70% of Canadians thinking, yes, climate change is caused by human activity, but this decreased over time, and we reach about 62% of Canadians who think that climate change is caused by human activity. And this trend is not unique to a specific sector, to a specific province or specific gender or age group. It's consistent across all provinces, regions, genders, and age groups. There's a decline in that awareness of something that scientists has already established. So this slide sums up like some of the what we call the headwinds and tailwinds of like things that are been going well and things that we're worried about. And as you see, there is steady and good support for the growth of renewable power like wind and energy power and clean energy. So that's great news that still Canadians are supportive of clean energy. We see also an increase, which is another worrying trend beside that decline in the belief of, or in thinking that human activity is the cause. There is an increase in the belief that oil and gas are important for Canada's future economy. If you look at the third arrow here, it goes a lot down, which indicates a decline in the priority of climate action. So when pollsters ask how important climate for you, then that is decreasing, and this is we're going to go a bit in the next slide. There's also but it also another thing is that Canadians are making sense of climate change through extreme weather events, through heat waves, through wildfires that we're going to witness this summer. So while they're not connecting climate change to human activity, or some of them don't, Canadians are kind of making sense of climate change through these events. So they connect these kind of bizarre weather events to the effect of climate change, and they report that they are impacted, or the majority of Canadians report that they are impacted by these events. This chart shows that decline of climate priority for people, and what you see is that pre the pandemic, actually climate was a big priority for people. It was at 40%, and then it dropped by half over the years. And it's just and as you can see here is that as people are putting in climate and environment down, their inflation, concern about affordability, the cost of living inflation is just going up. So these are going up while climate change is declining as a priority or as a concern for Canadians. This slide shows some of the demographic variations. Canadians tend to worry more about climate change, and these groups are more likely to understand that human activities are causing climate change. They are also more supportive of investment in clean energy, it's not only young adults, but also seniors similarly are more supportive of investment in clean energy. Also, some level of worrying is good, and that's what drives action when we're worried about the impact of climate change. However, when people are too overwhelmed, it might have negative impact on them, and so the impact, and actually it hinders their support. They become or they do less action when they become too anxious or feel helpless about doing anything for climate change. So when the impact of climate change unfortunately hit the young Canadians the hardest, especially at the mental health level. 78% of Canadians report that climate change impact their overall mental health. 73 unfortunately find the future frightening, and we don't want this to happen. Yes, climate change is happening and it has negative impacts, but also there's space for action, and that's what we hope that people worry, but not to be passive or feeling hopeless about what's going on. Okay, so a few things about what to do. First thing is that through our work and what we've been doing at Reclimate is, spread the word, and this is really important. So we need spokesperson, people who talk to people about climate change, people who are not classified as official speakers, not necessarily scientists, not politicians, but just, more spokesperson. We need doctors, we need farmers, we need those people who can talk to their community about climate change. But also people need to talk to each other. Research shows that people tend to trust family and friends more than anybody and influenced by that. And so the best thing is that we talk to family and friends about climate change. Another thing is that we need to build that confidence in people that they can do things, and that work that they are doing is impactful and changing things. Another thing is that we need to change a bit of the language of what we people. So we talk about humans, not concept, and use frames that appeal to broadly, like including protecting our communities, preserving our forests. We need to have safe and clean energy. So these are frames that really appeal to people more than just talking about concepts, and people need to see that people like us are affected, and that's what drives the action. The data tells us that actually messages and pictures with the human faces outperforms others that don't have a human-centered communication. Finally, I feel it feels just we're probably tight in time, but it's I think there are some tips about talking about affordability. Affordability is kind of it's on top of each one's mind, and so in our climate communication, we emphasize one talking about the immediate cost savings of the climate solutions we're proposing, but also what if talk about the loss that we're going to have if we don't do the action. So not doing action for climate change is going to cost us more in the future. And emphasize the long-term benefit of clean energy, and that includes stability. It's better for the well-being of families. It's better for our health system. So it's just for the well-being of the whole society. We are doing these actions, and just finally, we're inviting everyone. So this is the end of the presentation, but we're inviting anyone who would like to engage with us to come for a casual call on May 27th. We're just gonna have a conversation about what do you think and what you believe, but also if you are interested in engaging with your climate, we'll be happy to have that conversation. So if you just use the QR code, it'll take you to a survey, fill out the survey, and on May 26th, we will send the link for those who answered their survey and registered for this session. And thank you so much. Oh, and next is Montana.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm just going to share my screen. It takes a second. We can't do two things at once anymore, or I can't. Okay, hopefully y'all can see that. So my name is Montana Burgess. I'm the Executive Director of Neighbors United. I normally am on the land of the Snakes peoples in the West Kootenays, which is southeastern British Columbia. And today I'm actually in the center of the world, Toronto. So happy to be here. You just did a great job setting up the problem and the challenge. And this is actually a 2021 climate access and climate narratives graphic I like to show. So these numbers are obviously updated, but basically here we've got a big challenge, right? Which was just laid out, that we have a small amount of Canadians that are really concerned about climate change. And then we have this big chunk, like half, that are concerned, but they're not engaged yet. Their support's not reliable. They're busy, they're going to school, they're getting their kids to daycare, they're just trying to get by, they're not engaged. And so this is the chunk of people, as environmentalists, we are not good at communicating with, we're not good at talking with. We're good at talking to the alarmed, but not the folks in the middle. So that's what I want to kind of zero in. And to start, I want to tell you a story from 2008. So 2008, there was an election in the US, there's ballot measures in a bunch of states, and in California, marriage equality, same-sex marriage, was on the ballot as a ballot measure, Proposition 8, and the polling was looking really good. 60% of people in California said they were going to vote to legalize same-sex marriage, and 40% were going to vote against. But then election day came, and it was a big progressive sweep that year. It was the year of Obama's first term, and California is a progressive state, but that day they lost. 54% had voted against marriage equality. And this was the 28th straight loss for the movement. And the organizers at the LGBT Center in LA did something amazing. They said, what are we doing wrong? We're doing something wrong, which is a hard thing to do as a human, right? Admit you've done something wrong. And so they decided to go to the doorstep as visibly queer people and ask people they believe had voted against them, like what was going on, try to figure out why they were saying they were going to show up and vote for and then voting against on election day. So they started knocking on the doors of people across California, and they had a small crew of organizers, and they built up thousands of volunteers, and they figured out how to talk, how to be honest, how to hear what was going on for people, and ultimately decrease homophobia and persuade people to support same-sex marriage. So when I heard this story about how this worked, this thing called deep canvassing, which was birthed out of here, I went, why aren't we doing this in the environmental movement? Why aren't we trying to reach people on the fence and persuade them to be in support of the solutions we need? So deep canvassing is an engagement tactic that transforms instead of is transactional. Throw in the chat if you've done any traditional canvassing, maybe in an election or for a candidate before. Tell us how that went for you. But often those interactions are very quick. You're getting a yes, they support your candidate. You maybe give them a lawn sign or ask them to donate money. You get a no, you just get out of there. You get a maybe you spend a minute or two. And this isn't bad to do this. It's a great tactic, but it doesn't persuade anyone. Deep canvassing is rooted in listening with honest curiosity and holding non-judgment for the concerns of people and drawing out what's on both sides of the issue or the conflict so they can then begin to see that they have cognitive dissonance. And the way we do this is we share our personal life, lived experience in an issue, and we help the other person do the same. And so then they can wrestle with their cognitive dissonance, and out of that, they will change their mind. And that change lasts, it's durable. So here's some science for those of you that love science. There's been a number of randomized control tests done on different deep canvases over the years. And you can see here the persuasion impact of the deep canvas is anywhere between 8 and 20%. And these are huge numbers. Also, the persuasion lasts anywhere up to 9 months, maybe longer. It just hasn't been researched longer by data scientists. So this is showing that deep canvassing is a very effective form of persuasion and a long-lasting form of persuasion. And there's nothing that comes close to this. And elections are won often by 2 and 3%. So these are big numbers. So in deep canvassing, your goal is to move people up the scale. So at the beginning, you ask on a scale of 0 to 10 where someone stands on an issue. So on supporting the federal government maintaining the carbon tax, or in supporting all electric buildings in your community, or whatever. And then you go through the script with them. And at the end, you ask them that question again. And if they've moved up the scale and gone into one of these buckets, that's how we're measuring the impact of persuasion that we're having in those conversations. There's 3 key elements to success. The first is you need to iterate and get a script that works as a persuasive roadmap for your conversations. The second is you need to develop a really robust training program to help your canvassers be good at deep canvassing, building their skills in compassionate curiosity and gentle assertiveness and honorable interruptions and storytelling. And then third, you need to create a team and culture that supports and heals canvassers so they can have the hard conversations and keep coming back, be they paid canvassers or volunteer canvassers. So what happened for us, we had been doing really great community organizing across the West Kootenay region since 2016. And our campaign was called 100% Renewable Kootenays. And we were trying to get each local government to commit to 100% renewable energy in their community level. So that means getting all transportation and buildings on renewable energy by mid-century. It was going really great. We ID'd enough supporters in each community, got them organized through a petition and then letter writing and those kind of escalating actions, and had them show their city council or local government they wanted this. And then inevitably there'd be so many of them, the local government would pass it because they had to, because enough of their voters wanted it. And so when we got to Trail, put in the chat if you've ever been to Trail. I would love to hear that. Trail is a great town. It's a town built around a smelter. You can see this bottom right folder. This is a shot from downtown looking up at the smelter, which refines lead and zinc. It's the world's largest lead and zinc refinery. And it is a town where it became famous or infamous in the 80s because there was massive lead pollution happening in the community and children were getting very sick and dying. So they had to clean up their act. And it's a town, a frontline community familiar with the effects of environmental pollution. So when we got to this town, because it's a single company, heavy industry town, we had this jobs versus environment in a very real way. And most people were super conflicted. We ran out of supporters after we ID'd about 120 or 150. So we went, this is a perfect place to test and adapt this method from the US deep canvassing and persuade people in the community to support the transition to 100% renewable energy. So we went out and we had hundreds and hundreds of conversations in this small town of 8,000 people. And we ultimately talked to almost 1,200 people with a team of 85 volunteers. And we had a 40.1% persuasion rate on the doors. So that means more than 1 in 3 people changed their mind. And we won. our campaign. And then we thought, you know what? We can't go back to the old way of just community organizing. We have to keep using our persuasion work and in our own campaigns where it's needed, and training others to do this as well. So we have projects and partnerships going on where all these dots are coast to coast. We have a team in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia. We have a team over in St. John's, Newfoundland. We have partners in the US and other parts of Canada. So we are learning how to do this in different suburban, small town, and rural areas on a whole bunch of different climate, energy, and biodiversity topics and campaigns. So really what I want to leave you with is how to use the principles of deep canvassing in any kind of conversation you're having where you want to reach that movable middle and reach beyond the choir. So when you're telling your story, be it about what your lived experience is in climate impacts, be it about any environmental challenge that you want to communicate around, the value of nostalgia is so powerful. So if you can effectively name how something was before and now how it is after you've experienced this changing climate or whatever the environmental issue is, that is so powerful so people can see what like a dream and nightmare scenario are. And then you need to make it about people. So be it about you or a loved one. It's not that we don't care about the trees and animals and plants and all the other elements of nature, but people are really good at only seeing what's in front of them. So we have to make it so relatable. And people and those we love are the most central parts of our lives. Next, you have to be able to name your feeling about how this change before and after is making you feel, and what is like really at stake for you in that change. And then if you have dissonance, like you could say, I know it feels really too late, but better late than never. You name that dissonance and you overcome it to show them it's possible to resolve your own dissonance. And then you can do that in a conversation. You can do that in a public speaking event. You can do it through communications as well. So here I have a kind of a brief summary of how you apply it in communications. And we have a journalism project called Living Here, which is stories where we take relatable people to our intended audiences and we help them tell their stake story in whatever issue we're talking about, and then have it be solutions focused as well, because people need some hope to keep moving forward in this stuff. So you can see in the top right corner here, this is a story about this guy, Mark Jenner, who's an oil and gas worker, but totally electrified his house. So we really ground his identity in being an oil and gas worker and the community he lives in, which is actually a West Kootenay community, and how much he loves and cares for his family. Then telling a personal climate stake story. The second photo here down in the middle is a picture of my child who has asthma. And when I tell my personal stake story, and if I had more time, I would tell it to all of you, I talk about how she had an asthma attack and how scary it was and how helpless I felt. And then how I've seen the world get smokier in British Columbia compared to where I grew up and where I live now, and how scared I am to let her go outside in the summer for fear that she'll have an asthma attack and not recover, much like when a kid did in British Columbia last summer who had asthma and died. And then naming and resolving that dissonance too, like it feels too late, but better late than never. And then finally, having your communications be solutions focused. So that could be either like a solution that's already happening in the community or a policy that you want to see passed, and have your subject say like, so therefore we need to have all electric buildings in our community as one thing we can do to tackle this problem. And that's it. So if there's one thing I want to leave you with, it's just really get personal in the way you communicate about climate impacts, and make sure that you are making it about people and feelings. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Katie now, and I'll drop some links in the chat for what I talked about.
All right, thank you so much. I think you can hear me and see me. Amazing. Fantastic. I love there's so many things that both Montana and Gada have shared that are so resonant. And so I hope that folks here will like see the similarities between the kind of conversations that we're all, or kind of the advice that we're all trying to share. Be like, okay, there must be something to it. So we'd love to hear how you put these into practice. My name is Katie Harper. My pronouns are she, her. I'm joining from Takaranto, Treaty 13 territory. And some of the work that I do is involved with a group called Talk Climate to Me, and we host conversations around learning about this, but yes, like how do we actually do it? And so I was so excited to hear that Montana was going to be here, because the deep canvassing toolkit is so useful for this work. And I love that, Montana, you included some of the stuff that we can all do. And I kind of want to take that a little bit further, because while we might be designing campaigns, we might be on the doorsteps, we might also be doing this at the dinner table. So I want to just offer a few things that we've learned about talking climate through our work engaging thousands of people through Talk Climate to Me. And so just to start is like, how do we actually talk to people about, climate? There you go. Let's talk about talk climate. Think about this. If I were to say, go and talk climate, convince someone of this, what would you do? We are all probably here because we have faced the heartbreaking truths of the climate crisis, and we find it super painful to see people idling their cars, and then this backdrop of politicians agitating against the carbon tax and all of these other ways that the little progress we've had is actually being disrupted, right? So maybe like me, you've been in this situation where you're like, come on, I really, really want to yell at people. Like, can't you see what's happening? Tell me, tell me if this is you. Or maybe you bring your best facts game to the table. If only people understood. They're like, if people were a vessel and like we could just fill them up with knowledge, and then they would change. Or maybe, and I've definitely done this, we jump straight to sharing our beautiful visions of communal gardens and, affordable, comfortable housing for all. I know I've definitely done this. But in fact, this yelling, telling, and selling, as Renee Lertzman, a fantastic climate psychologist in this, it doesn't work. We know this because, well, A, it hasn't been working, and B, when was the last time that you changed because someone like yelled at you or shamed you or tried to coerce you in some way? It's not how that happens. And it doesn't take into account the psychology, the things that are hardwired into our brain to react. And that is that when we feel threatened, we go into self-protective behaviors. Those might look like denial. Maybe someone is saying something like, well, it's not that bad. It's a natural process. But underneath that, what might they be feeling? Maybe they're feeling overwhelmed by the scale of the problem. They feel some guilt about their own contribution, and it's easier to believe that it's natural than to deal with the cognitive dissonance that I might have an obligation to make some changes. So some people go right into rigidity. This is not happening. This is not real. This does not affect me. Some people might go into doom and overwhelm and kind of just kind of collapse, like, why bother? There's nothing we can do at this point to fix things. And maybe we've all felt this too. But underneath that might be a feeling of powerlessness and feeling scared. And again, it being easier to believe there's no fix than for me to actually have to worry that we might not get it right. So understanding, so if there's one thing that I want you to leave with the session is really to really hone in on the fact that deep listening, empathy, compassion for what people are going through for their real lived experiences and the real challenges they're facing, if we can't meet them there, we're not going to win at this. Okay, I'm going to share a very few tips. Obviously, we just have a few moments, so we won't go deep in this. We'd love to continue the conversation at Talk Climate to Me and other places, but we love these guiding principles designed by Renee Lertzman through this project Inside Out, and it's all about attunement. So tuning into what people are really saying, revealing the truth, and supporting them by convening. There's so much power in bringing people together. So that's a fantastic resource. I'm going to share a few tips and then we'll wrap up the session. When you're having a climate conversation, maybe it's like in line at the grocery store, maybe it's your cranky uncle who wants to fight you on the carbon tax, or maybe you're designing a whole campaign. But in any case, all of these kind of work. And the first one is really to kind of pause and breathe. If we can't center ourselves, if we're activated, we actually can't have a good, we can't do any good in this space. So I feel like one of the key things to remember here is to remember that the goal is to do no harm. If we become activated ourselves, we probably are going to entrench people, increase rigidity, and it's not going to do anything. So if this is not the time when we're able to do that, that's okay. Tap out, come back to the conversation later. And remember that the inner work of understanding our own triggers and activations is actually a critical part of this. The second piece, is around listening with empathy and acknowledging their feelings. So listening with empathy means of really, really trying to tune in to what people are feeling and acknowledging their very real concerns. This is part of a comic from Nora Kroger. And she talks about, here's this example. Instead, I think about the climate a lot. What do you think about this issue? We're asking questions. Sounds like you're feeling like no one else cares. That can feel quite lonely. Really, really validating experiences. And how did you handle other situations when you felt this way? Tapping into the wisdom and the expertise that people have, because a sense of belonging and a sense of agency and a sense of being heard are all such vital things in terms of supporting people in their efforts. Sorry, I just realized you've seen this whole thing there. Maybe that will go away. Looking for connections. Climate change can feel like a big, scary, messy, abstract problem, and connecting it to what people really care about makes it really vivid. So Montana shared the really relevant, like the resonant story of her own child at facing asthma, and that is such an important, that's such a strong example of this. We also can connect to things like, someone if it cares about food security, well, we can talk about the risks of drought and the ways that communities like here in Flemington Park are addressing food security and access to good food. We also, if someone cares about energy costs, we can talk about the ways that heat pumps can create energy security and affordability, including the amazing leadership that we see of Indigenous communities like the Heiltsuk Nation out on the West Coast. Whatever the person cares about, maybe they care about wine. And it's like, oh man, the area for growing crops where we have wine is not, those are diminishing. But hey, there's some really neat work on biodynamic farming that's approaching this. Whatever it is, connecting it to what they care about and showcasing those solutions can be really valuable. And finally, talking about your own story. Saying, I got really scared last year when my dog Scruffy fainted during the heat wave. It was so scary and I wanted to do something to help. That's way more impactful, and it builds connection way more effectively than yakking on about facts or yelling at someone to change. Talking about climate matters. I'll end with reminding us of this. This is one, I liked this headline, but actually this finding that people underestimate climate concern has been found in numerous studies all around the world. However many people care about climate, a good number of them think that not as many people don't, which is not true. The implications of this is that it means that people are not necessarily taking action in their own lives or having expectations of actions because, oh, well, I guess other people don't care about this. This is true of decision makers too. If they don't think that their constituents care, then why would they make policies to support that? So one of the most important ways, and Gada talked about this earlier, is of closing this perception gap is by talking climate. And talking climate can be these real conversations like we've been talking about. It can be amazing campaigns like we've heard about, but it can also be really low-key things like inviting your pal over for an induction stove demo. We've seen tons of movement around these like heat pump parties where people can normalize, oh yeah, I electrified my home and it's great, come and check it out. Dr. Catherine Hayhoe says talking about climate knocks over the very first domino in the chain of social change. So I want to, I'll leave it there. We would love to keep talking with you. We do monthly community calls, and our next one is with Brianne White for our kids, which is a great group. And Talk Climate to Me will be coming back next spring, 2025. And yeah, I'll leave it there. But thank you so much. And I pass it back to Isabel.
Thank you. Okay, here I am. So thank you to Katie, Montana, and Gada for joining us today. I really personally enjoyed really the actionables. Like I definitely feel excited to try and have a deep conversation over climate with a complete stranger. And I'm also very excited to hear your encouragement around really approaching the issue of the climate crisis with the emotional reality that we're all experiencing, try to make sense of it, first and foremost. I really think that will help us, collaborate collectively in the future. That's my hope. So thank you so much for that knowledge, that insight, that experience that you brought to the table. In terms of our Q&A, unfortunately, we only have time for one question, but we have linked all the presentations and links to our amazing panelists' work and organizations, so please check them out. So without further ado, our one question for our Q&A today will be, how can people, including activists, challenge the fake news, misinformation, disinformation, and climate change denial? So thank you, Yobi, for that question. Maybe just, for the purpose of time and order and sense, I'll ask, we can ask all panelists, but Katie, would you be open to starting us off with your answer?
Sure. And I think Reclimate has done some work specifically on this, so I'm excited to hear more about that. But I would say we need to tell better stories. We need to capture hearts and minds through showcasing the ways that climate action is happening. It's making life better, and so on, and that everyday people get to experience it. One of my favorite headlines from the last year was, was from Wired, and it said, "People hate the idea of car-free cities until they live in one." And I think the experiential piece of people actually being in a place and seeing, oh, okay, these bike lanes were not so bad, and actually my small business is getting more foot traffic, or whatever it is, can be really helpful. But I will say, the outside of big campaigns, the one-on-one stuff, it's all relational, and I think not giving up on people who are tempted towards that way, but really trying to hear what their concerns are and how that the people who are pushing that misinformation are meeting their needs, or addressing their fears. We don't think it's productive, of course, but those concerns are real, and so how can we listen to them?
Jump in next. I think as an individual, the thing you can do is use kind of the principles I shared around deep canvassing to humanize yourself, build some rapport with someone, find your lived experience on the issue, be emotional about it, be real about it, help them do the same. And once you've done that and you've helped them find their lived experience, you are a trusted messenger for them. And then only then can you respond to misinformation or disinformation. And you have to keep the response simple, right? So you have to build your rapport, build that deep emotional lived experience connection where they're grounded. And then if you heard earlier them say something that's rooted in mis or disinformation, you can say, what's on your mind now about this thing? Before you said this, what do you think now? See what they say. If it's still there, be like, okay, well, address it in one phrase. Don't make it long. And if they still are stuck in that, they're stuck in it. But a lot of the time, once you've built that rapport and trust and got them to an emotional lived experience place and out of fact land, they will overcome their mis or disinformation.
Yeah, I can add just quickly. I know we don't have time, but I think it's just one of the things that I would suggest. Well, misinformation, there are so many types of climate misinformation. There's misinformation, but what the research has been showing, that misinformation is not only about climate change, whether it's caused by humans, or, that's an area of misinformation, but actually there's a trend now that's going up, is that, yes, we believe in climate change. We believe that it's happening. We believe in impact. However, the solutions that you propose are not working. Renewables like wind and solar, they are not effective. They are not sustainable. They're costly. They cause more pollution than they actually reduce. So it's just a lot of misinformation around solutions. And we're going to be publishing and doing a lot of webinars. So I encourage everyone to go to our website. It's reclimate.ca and follow up with events. We have a few events lined up. One in wildfire misinformation, which we expect sometime. So it's just, keep an eye for this. But what I would actually suggest is that from misinformation, just in terms of solution, is that we need more stories about solutions that worked. And what do we do? So these are the solutions that are working, that they are effective. So more stories sharing success than warning. That's a great way to counter misinformation. And again, just go to our website and follow up with our events, and we'll be hosting a bunch and releasing some research that provides specific advice for this area.
Amazing, amazing. I don't know if the mic cut that off or not, but a third time, amazing. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for your time joining us today. So that is a wrap on How to Talk Climate. Please stay tuned for our next panel, which will begin momentarily, quasi-immediately after this one. We'll be talking to some expert campaigners, including MP Mike Morris, campaign organizer Tanya Cameron, and youth environmentalist Cameron Armstrong about strategies and tactics that are essential for navigating the political landscape in pursuit of climate action. So thank you again for joining us, and stay tuned. We've got a great panel coming up.